time for Under 30. Rocket Lab is the subject of the discussion as the stock's under pressure here, down about 7%. On news, some disappointments with its most recent launch. But this is a stock that I can't recall looking at before. RKLB, not a high price stock. We're talking sub $5, but 7% is a big percentage, whatever your stock price is.
It is, and actually I saw this name pre-market this morning, and why it caught my attention, it was down 12%. So 7% actually seems modest compared to where we once were earlier today. But here to tell us more on some of the selling pressure we're seeing in Rocket Lab today, I'd like to welcome in George Tsilis, senior markets correspondent here for the network. George, just based on my brief understanding of this story, we had a fail to launch in terms of one of its latest launches, and they already did trim their third quarter guidance as a result. So to me, that's the more important part of the story, is they're already seeing a material impact pretty much in real time here.
Yeah, there is some challenges for the company. I mean, they did lose their payload, and this is the 41st launch that the company's actually had. They've launched successfully over 170 low orbit satellites, which essentially is not just a domestic issue. When we talk about SpaceX and communications that are now becoming more global, and even the connected car, all these new technologies require low orbit satellites for seamless connectivity or communications. And I think, if you think about low orbit satellites displacing the traditional, 5G networks, this is a huge business overall from a growth trajectory and on a forward basis from a secular technology standpoint as well. But I think you got to look at what's happening in this space, not just domestically, but globally. One of the challenges this company has faced, despite the fact that it's been growing its sales in the last year about 70% and expected to grow at 50%, is again some scalability attributes to the company. Now, they did, of course, lose their first payload for a launch, and that's putting pressure on the stock. But their sales, from the standpoint of growth, are expected to improve about 50% year over year to about 400 million compared to about 290 last year. But I think if you look at the company, which was a reverse merger via SPAC back in 2021, the challenge I still see here for this particular company is the launches are quite expensive. And I think if you think about the total number of launches, 41, that's very small. And so it's very difficult for this company to achieve scalability unless it actually increases the number of launches quite aggressively.
George, I'm just trying to see where this all stacks up, because, this isn't the biggest of spaces. You kind of can count the number of names on one or two hands for the most part here. Seems in terms of sort of the smaller shops, we got Rocket Lab, Astra and Firefly Aerospace. Virgin Orbit was in this space, but not operating anymore. This particular rocket, the Electron rocket from Rocket Lab, is about a 90% success rate now. After having a string of about 20 successful, and now it's about 4 and 41 that have failed. That sounds good, but you compare this to SpaceX Falcon 9, they got 230 straight successful missions. SpaceX is lapping the field, it seems.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think if you look at this whole field, one, it's very competitive, and two, there's a lot of private competitors. If you look at Blue Origin from basically Amazon, that's a privately held company. SpaceX, which is also privately held. There's some talks about this one becoming public. These companies are very, very well funded. Again, from the standpoint of equity capital and a large base of investors that have names behind them like Jeff Bezos and of course Elon Musk. So it's a very competitive field, and I think that really speaks to some of the challenges that a lot of these individual companies are having. Even though this company is not small from the standpoint of some of the other companies we've talked about, I mean, its market cap is close to $3 billion. But I think the challenge is, and if you look at the forward estimates for earnings, they're still expected to lose about 20 cents a share going into 2024. Now, it's better than 25 cents a loss that they're estimating for 23, but still, nonetheless, they're losing money. And I think that presents some challenges for this particular stock, not necessarily as a company. In other words, their sales are actually pretty good, but I think the earnings profile still speaks to some challenging stock environment for the name.
Yeah, and as we can see based on today, I mean, one of these, I mean, I know this is a pretty substantial, obviously, news catalyst for the stock, but one move like this is able to send shares catapulting. They have recovered some slightly on the session, but still, I mean, with a 7.5% move to the downside, this name is obviously very volatile in nature. But we will leave it there. Really great breakdown on Rocket Lab. I believe our first time discussing on this show. That's George Tsilis, senior markets correspondent here for the network.